Hello and welcome to the ICC Livecast, a new podcast series where we take a deeper dive into global business trends and ideas. I'm your host, Thomas Paris, and today I'm joined by Pottengal Mukundan, Director of the International Maritime Bureau at the International Chamber of Commerce's Department of Commercial Crime Services. So just a few notes before we get started. We are pre-recording this episode, so there will not be a live chat component this time. The reason is that we had this fantastic face-to-face opportunity during Muku's visit to Singapore for the launch of our latest certificate. But for everyone watching this video, I recommend that you register for free and early access to our upcoming live streams. In this episode, we will discuss the key role that the IMB is playing in mitigating maritime risk and commercial crime, the impacts on global piracy, and what role both the ICC Academy and IMB will play in providing solutions for the industry in the form of the new NVOCC Code of Conduct, Register, and Certificate. Thank you so much for coming aboard, Muku. Could you tell us a little bit about the IMB and the Department of Commercial Crime Services?
It's a pleasure. So the ICC Commercial Crime Services is a specialized division of the International Chamber of Commerce, the ICC. And we look into commercial crime for business. In the Commercial Crime Services, we have 4 divisions: the International Maritime Bureau, the Counterfeiting Intelligence Bureau, the Financial Investigation Bureau, and what we call FraudNet. So what concerns us for the NVOCC register is the International Maritime Bureau, the IMB, which looks into shipping, trading, and trade finance issues.
Right.
It was started in 1981, and it arose out of, at that time, a number of very serious maritime insurance claims, where ships fully laden with cargoes were sunk. At that time, our role was to collect as much information as we could and feed it back to the insurance industry in respect of these cases. We have since moved on from there. And about 4 or 5 years after that, in mid-80s, we began looking at verifying bills of lading for banks. The reason is that banks have to take their decisions based on the documents that they see. And they have no way of knowing if those documents actually represent a physical cargo which has been shipped. If it does not, then they would be financing a spurious transaction with all the implications of money laundering which flow from that. So that was the trade finance side. In 1991, we also set up our Piracy Reporting Center in Kuala Lumpur, which till today remains the only center in the world which collates information on attacks against ships around the world, covers the whole world. There are other regional centers run mainly by governments who focus on the attacks in their area, but we remain the only center, first of all, which is industry-sponsored, and secondly, which collects information from all around the world. And it has become a major resource for anyone looking at piracy attacks, the frequency, the areas, the high-risk issues related to maritime piracy.
Very interesting. In this extremely volatile context, who reaches out to the International Maritime Bureau?
We get our information from the front line of the crime itself, that is from the shipmasters whose ships are attacked, or the ship owners, either during the attack or shortly afterwards. And once we receive that information, it is verified very quickly and passed on immediately to law enforcement agencies, navies, Coast Guard, police in different parts of the world with whom we have direct contact, so that they can respond. And in serious cases, we will follow up with them as to what what they have done. It has helped prevent serious consequences of these attacks in numerous cases. It has helped prevent the hijacking of ships, the kidnapping, and in some cases injury or killing of the crew. So it's been a very valuable service.
So it's safe to say that the IMB is responsible not just for saving lives, but millions of dollars worth of cargo. It's important to point out that maritime transport is essential to the world's economy. Even today, over 90% of the world's goods are transported by the sea. So security is important.
Yes, we provide a valuable service.
Yes.
Piracy itself will always go up. It goes up, then it gets dealt with, it comes down, and then it rises again. That's been our experience, and that will continue. What we have to be ready for is to learn the lessons of the piracy phenomena that we have had in the past. Somalia is a very good example, which was unique in some ways.
Right.
And learn those lessons and be ready to apply them when the next peak arises somewhere else in the world. And I think that's important. The real pity would be if we don't learn those lessons and we're going to start again from the beginning. Remember that in trying to deal with maritime piracy, you have a huge number of very diverse stakeholders. You've got the coastal state, you've got the coastal state's response agencies, you've got maritime shipping, which is international in its nature, different types of cargoes, ship owners, insurers, crew issues. It's a very wide canvas.
But your reach goes well beyond piracy. How and when are your teams called upon when it comes to maritime trade risk related to bills of lading fraud?
So the NVOCC project comes under the area of trade finance frauds, and which we have been looking at, as I said, from the mid-80s onwards. What we have found in the last 10 or 15, what we have found in the last 15 years is that the vast majority of the bills of lading which we identify as false are issued by non-vessel owning common carriers, NVOCCs. We come to know about this because it is the banks who send us these bills of lading to verify. Often under time pressure, because the banks have a very short window in which they can either reject the transaction or they pay under it. So we work with that time window, and we verify these bills of lading, and we pass this information to the banks so that then they can take their decision as to what they have to do. In some cases, they may decide not to proceed. In others, they may decide that they will proceed but under different conditions and so on and so forth. But this process has resulted in a huge wealth of data which is now in our database at the CCS. And it identifies patterns, it identifies trends, it identifies commodities which are used in these kind of frauds. And so when we have a new kind of fraud, that is very quickly identified, and we use it to help us with the future. And it's a unique resource.
And what are the different types of indicators that banks should look out for in this area of fraud?
Each bank has its own criteria for identifying what they consider to be high risk. And it depends upon the mix of their customers, the areas that they deal with, the commodities that they work with, the values that they are working with. So they will have their own parameters. So of the transactions which become high risk for that particular bank, from that group of transactions, they will decide to send us a selection for verification. That's how the system works. So, and once, because it is impossible to verify every transaction that the bank has got, they have to do it on a risk-based approach.
Exactly. And this is where your new NVOCC Code of Conduct and Register come into play. These new tools both launched in January 2019, alongside our latest certificate on the same topic. What can you tell us about this project?
This arose because from our analysis, over 95% of the false bills of lading which we have identified have been issued by NVOCCs. So when we approached, when the banks were told about this, they asked us to look at a way to mitigate this vulnerability. And the NVOCC register is the result of our work in this area. So our basic principle here was to ensure that this was a business solution to a business problem. We didn't want it to become a matter for regulators to step in. And we also wanted it to be economically beneficial for the NVOCCs to participate in our program. And this has led to the NVOCC register. The NVOCC register is something that we invite all NVOCCs to sign up to. When they sign up to it, they also sign up to a code of conduct for the issuance of bills of lading. It does not deal with any other aspect of the NVOCC operation. And what we are looking for here is that the NVOCCs will have available all the backup documentation which includes their authority to issue bills of lading and the master bill of lading issued by the carrier with them should that bill of lading be questioned. When the bill of lading is sent to us and by the bank and we verify it and it turns out that the bill of lading appears to be false, then we will go back to the NVOCC and we can ask them to produce this backup documentation. If they are not able to produce the documentation or give a satisfactory explanation as to how that bill of lading came to be issued, then that counts as a mark against them. And they are allowed to have no more than 2 such marks within one membership year. After the second, and all these, in the case of every infringement, there will be correspondence between us and them which confirm what has happened. After the second infringement, we would ask them to either go through a training program for their key personnel, so that they understand the very important role that bills of lading play in the trading chain, and how other stakeholders like banks, shipping companies, and others rely upon that bill of lading for the smooth movement of goods and financing of goods. They will also have to show that they have made some changes within the way they operate to ensure that bills of lading are not issued recklessly. Once they provide these 2 aspects, provide these 2 pieces of information, then they will be allowed to remain on the register. But they will not be allowed another infringement.
Right.
Which, if there is a further infringement, they risk being removed from the register.
Okay.
Now, why is this important? Because we are hoping that the banks will tell their customers to ask the NVOCCs who provide their shipping documents to sign up to the register, because it gives the banks a degree of assurance that this document has been produced under a minimal good practice. So there is a very subtle pressure upon the NVOCC which will to sign up to the register. and comply with the code of conduct. It therefore becomes in his economic interest to do so. And that is always the best way to improve standards rather than by enforcement.
So this project extends past these NVOCCs to the banks themselves. But of course, they're not the only players on the transaction chain. What would you say is the value for the exporters?
Well, the benefit for the exporters is that when they present their documents to a bank for payment under trade finance arrangements, a bill of lading which is issued by an NVOCC who's registered on the NVOCC register, those documents may be processed a little faster. And that is their benefit, and of course, time is very important to these traders.
Are there some risk elements that you expect will either adapt or percolate through this safeguard you're implementing for the industry?
This project is aimed purely at the issue of bills of lading, at the risks associated with the issue of bills of lading. So we think that it will help to reduce that risk quite significantly. But, with fraud, you will always find that people will try to game the system over time. And the important issue for us is to make sure that the register and the terms of the code of conduct are such that it evolves to deal with the new risks that we see. But if we can succeed in taking away the large proportion of the risk in the issuance of bills of lading, that is a very big step forward.
That makes sense. And how do you see future leaps in technology playing a role in the coming years?
The technology with respect to the issuance of bills of lading is changing, and people are looking at blockchain, for example, and other such platforms to provide digital bills of lading. That may change the way in which the register and the code of conduct works. What is important is for the register and the code of conduct to keep up with it. And to, so long as there are bills of lading being issued, then the register and the code of conduct must be a way to make sure that they are not manipulated. Fraud will always be there. You'll never be able to eliminate fraud. People will always find a way around it. That's been the case since the beginning of maritime commerce.
The International Chamber of Commerce has been looking ahead at key areas that might impact global trade. I say that these kind of business solutions fit nicely into that vision.
Given that ICC, represents the interests of business, anything that affects business is an area for ICC to see if they can contribute to it. And I think that with issues of digitization, cybercrime in our area and others, there will be new risks emerging. And with those risks, I think ICC as the World Business Organization is uniquely placed to try and address them and make the necessary representations to governments and international organizations to change the law and change best practices, conventions, and so on and so forth.
Speaking of best practices, last summer we came together with the aim of complementing your project by creating a companion training program to better understand the critical role of the bill of lading and the importance of proper issuance. For those unaware, the ICC Academy Bill of Lading Certificate has now launched day and date with your Bureau's NVOCC registry and code of conduct. With these resources now available, I'm curious about your perspective, especially behind the importance placed on education in this area.
Well, the ICC Academy in the NVOCC project plays a very, very key role, in providing this training program. And I think that this training program may not be only limited to delegates who are whose companies have fallen short of the code of conduct. I mean, the NVOCC Bill of Lading project and the online course, I think, is valuable to anyone in banks, shipping companies who are handling bills of lading so that they see the bigger picture, of where the bill of lading sits in the trade transaction.
Right.
One of the big problems we find is where people don't have that bigger picture, and therefore they look at the bill of lading in a through very narrow perspectives, and that is where the problems arise because they don't see the interests of other people who rely upon it.
Right.
It's very important, and I don't think this course is limited only to the NVOCC project. It's got broader applicable appeal.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Looking ahead at 2019, what would you say are your Bureau's biggest hurdles?
Well, we are very heavily focused, and we have been last year as well. And going forward, we are heavily focused to meet the changing nature of international trade in terms of digitization. So we are upgrading all our systems. They are evolving all the time so that we can remain relevant in the verification of trade transactions in 10 years, 20 years from now. And we will keep improving. We don't believe that it is possible for us to simply rely on what we have done last year. We need to look at what's coming 2 years from now, 3 years, 5 years from now, and look forward in that respect. And we are already focused on that.
Right. This is an exciting time. Everything's finally out there now.
Well, the NVOCC register is now open for business, and the code of conduct is all written up. Our IT systems are ready to deal with people signing up for the register. So we are all set, and the online course is ready. So the project is now all complete. All we have now got to do is to make sure that it remains relevant.
Right.
So we look at changes which are taking place in the industry, and then upgrading the course for it, and upgrading our code of conduct and register concept.
Right.
And that will be an ongoing process, and we look at it every 6 months or so.
On this topic of learning and adapting, what are some unexpected challenges that you've run into?
There are a number of fraud types which are taking place today, and they're all different. But perhaps one of the more interesting ones is where we have some traders who are actually trading the physical cargo. They present a set of bills of lading to the bank for the physical cargo which is paid for. And then there is a second set of documents, sometimes simply copy documents, which are going through a different banking channel, simply to raise money, because the goods have been delivered and paid for under the first channel. And here they use this second set of documents simply to raise money. It is a challenge because the documents sometimes are excellent replicas of the original documents, genuine documents, because of course the traders have intimate knowledge of these documents.
Right.
So superficial checks will not confirm that this is a second set of documents, a multiple document. And that is a real challenge. But we have been able to verify many of these shipments, and once we tell the banks, and the banks are on notice, and then they have to deal with the relationship issues with their customers which arise. And some of these frauds, are frauds which are not transactional. They are relationship frauds. So they can carry on for years, because neither the buyer nor the seller is defrauded. They are both parties to the fraud, and therefore no one complains, and the bank is not aware that they are funding a spurious transaction unless they make meaningful checks. And those are, first of all, they're very interesting to do because it's quite a sophisticated kind of fraud. But it also has great value for the bank when it is identified. And there have been a number of these cases.
Has there been a shift in the types of commodities or practices prioritized by these fraudsters? I assume that these are all primarily raw materials being traded.
Well, from a fraudster's perspective, the commodity itself is simply a description. It is just a means to an end. It can be any commodity at all. But what attracts him more than others is commodities which are high value, because for the same effort, it is a higher amount of money that he gets out of it. Right. So it would be things like nickel briquettes, copper cathodes, and very large quantities of. We have had all kinds of other commodities, right. Very large quantities of coal, of steel, of iron ore, and there are other factors, in trade which are difficult. Like, for example, where you have containers, nobody knows what's inside a container except the person who has stuffed the container and the person who discharges it, destuffs it at the other end. No one else knows what's inside it. So the container becomes a very nice vehicle for a shell for all kinds of fraud.
As we wind down from the excitement of today's press conference, I wanted to slow down and take a moment to congratulate you on the successful launch of this project. As I think back over the last few months, I think I speak for all of us in qualifying this experience as both challenging but inherently rewarding. It's very important that your expertise in maritime trade be accessible to a new generation.
Thank you, Thomas. I think it's been a great project. In actual fact, we started really working on this only about maybe 6 months ago, on the real project. And we have brought the course to completion. We've got everything else lined up. Thanks to you for doing it. Thank you.
No, I couldn't have done it without you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Muku. It's been wonderful speaking with you. And for those looking to sign up for the NVOCC register, we recommend that you visit the International Maritime Bureau's website. There you'll also find the NVOCC Code of Conduct free of charge. And don't forget that the ICC Academy has just released a new course on the topic of bills of lading. You'll find a free demo on our website. If you're watching now, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can continue having these lovely chats together. And ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of the ICC Livecast. See you next time.